Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited today to have the legendary Linda McKissack. Linda, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Well, you have done so many things in your life, right? From working with your family in Texas to real estate to owning some clubs that didn't all work out the way that people thought it would. I kind of love to start from that macro perspective of how would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
Mm. Great question. Well, I truly believe we all are always asking God, am I in your calling? Help me to hear your voice. Because, I told you we were just on a cruise and there was a Christian comedian named Michael Jr. And he said something really profound, and I'll probably mess it up a little bit, but he basically was talking about when you're in God's gifts, how things, not that you don't have hardships, but how things flow and, you kind of get confirmation. And so I think all of us are always asking, are we in your will? Because we're all afraid that he has a bigger life planned maybe than we could probably plan on our own. But I also believe that God gives you every experience he gives you for a reason to serve others. And the worst thing that usually happens to you can turn out to be the biggest blessing. If you give it long enough and you look for what are you to learn from that experience. And so in the late 80s, early 90s, Texas had one of the worst economic crashes that they've ever had. Now, I always like to say I was in my early 20s, so I didn't even know what the word economy meant, much less is it a good one or a bad one. But I knew something was wrong because my husband, who was in the restaurant and nightclub business, was starting to stay up late at night. And at the time, he was a drinker. He's no longer drinks, but he was a drinker, and so he was drinking more. And there was just signs that we had some issues. Something was wrong. So I asked him, what's going on? What's wrong? And he eventually said, look, we're in trouble. We had to sell a nightclub in Dallas, kind of like a mini Dave and Buster's, that has all the games and pool tables and stuff like that, for $600,000 less than we owed against it. So we literally went to bed one night. The next day you wake up and the sale's over and you still owe $600,000 for something you no longer own. So, the good news about being naive and not really understanding economy and how bad it was, I think that helped me in some degree because I didn't realize how much money $600,000 was. And I had never made more than minimum wage up until that point. But I am a really hard worker. I came from a family of hard workers. And if you wanted anything, you had to work for it because there was nobody was going to give you money. And so working 2 and 3 jobs sometimes in high school, I was a hard worker, but I didn't really have any value to bring the world to get anything more than about minimum wage. So I always say the good news about that is I had no preconceived notion of what I should do to help him. I had to ask him, what do you think I should do? And he had a peewee football coach that had picked him up from one side of town for years and taken him to play on his peewee football team. And he kind of mentored my husband because my husband's father was never around. And so he said to him one day, if you want to make a lot of money, real estate is the way to do it. I like to laugh today and say my husband got confused. He was supposed to buy real estate, invest in real estate, and build real estate, not get a wife and get her to go work in real estate. But it truly was a great fit. I'd never even lived in a home that was owned. I didn't know what real estate was, what you did, any of those things. So I said, okay, that sounds good. How do I do that? And he had convinced me to go back to college because I didn't have any skill other than hard work. And so I was trying to figure out who I was in college, even though I was married and had kids. So he said, you go get a license and at that time they would use some of your college credits. You use some of your college credits, you get a license and you just help people buy and sell houses. And I thought, how hard can that be? Right. And I only made $3,000 gross my first year. Wow. And he said that was gross because he paid $15 for me to make $3. He said, you're not really helping here. But back then, if you really understood the real estate industry, there was no training. Literally, you were handed a license, you were handed a phone book and a desk and said, good luck, you're on your own. So I got blessed with someone paying for me a ticket to go to hear a seminar to hear Mike Ferry. And that seminar changed everything for me because it made me realize that any situation in life you have, somebody or some book has the answers if you go try to find it. And so that was the beginning of understanding about being learning based. And then eventually my husband would go ahead and, give up on the nightclub business. And to be honest with you, it was beginning to not fit our who we were as humans anyway.
Sure.
And so he began to get in the real estate business with me. And over the years, we just, I became a top salesperson, top 1/4% in the United States. It fit me behaviorally, who I was. And I'm tenacious and I'm hardworking. And so if you stay at anything long enough, you should get to the finish line. And so because of that, Keller Williams took notice. And when they took notice, they invited me in. And then as the opportunity opened up, Gary Keller tapped me on the shoulder. And I'm naive enough to not understand what really is involved and just say yes. And then once I'm in, I don't let go. I'm a dog with a bone. And so I went from being a top salesperson to owning a couple of franchises without any clue how to run them or what to do. And then I was tapped on the shoulder to go up to Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, Southern Ohio, and talk people into doing Keller Williams franchises. And turns out I'm pretty darn good. If I love something and I believe in it, I'm pretty darn good at getting other people to do it also. And so that's how we wound up getting into the Dayton area and, of course, meeting Trent, which is your friend. And it's been a blessing. I always say besides my family, the family I love to be with is my agents up in Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, because we've forged a battle together. And, that just really, really bonds you. And I love changing lives. And I could see the proof of lives truly changing from people believing in the opportunity. And because we had gone broke, we had to search out books about money because we apparently didn't know the right things about money. And Cash Flow Quadrant was the game changer book for us.
Wow.
Because it taught us that all of our money was coming in as a self-employed person, and that wealthy people and people who don't have economic crashes or graduallys and suddenlies that really disrupt their life, they move that their money comes in from the right side of the quadrant through businesses or through assets. And we didn't have really, we'd given up our last business because we had to sell it. But so we didn't really have any knowledge of that until we read that book. And that book was the game changer that sent us on the journey. And then trying to help other people understand too, especially in the real estate industry, the day you sell your last house is your last dollar. And in most small businesses, that's the case. If you don't set them up correctly or you don't figure out how to make them truly be an asset and do that. So it kind of just sent us on a journey of finding other people who, like us, felt like we were made for more than the situations we were in.
I always like to say that that's the difference between a practice and a business. A practice requires you to actually do the work in order to get paid, but a business should actually make money when you're not there, right? Like that's a big difference. So funny story. I am simultaneously listening to an audiobook earlier this week. 10x is greater than 2x, and I'm in this book, and the author starts talking about this real estate agent and all of this, and I was like, that sounds like Linda's story, right? Like, and I'm listening to the audiobook, and he mentions your name in there, and he begins to tell the story, and I was like, shut the front door. Like, that's amazing. Right. And so I was like, Linda McKissack's in this book, and I'm getting ready to interview her later this week. And one of the things that he talks about in the book is your willingness to leave behind a good life for a great life. Right. And so, and the risk of giving up. I mean, you had all of these listings with this other company before you went to Keller. And, this kind of first jump of this huge step of faith. And I know that there are tons of leaders listening right now who are wrestling with this step of faith. And I'm curious, how do you know when it's the right time to make that courageous jump?
Well, I don't think you're ever 100% sure. So if you're waiting for that, no, that won't happen. One of the best ways to explain this is a diagram that I got taught in Strategic Coach, that when I saw it, I went, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I've done unknowingly my whole life. And so I'll try my best to kind of describe it to you. The way our lives get really big is we make big, scary commitments. And I mean, they have to be scary. A lot of us, what we do is we start to make commitments, but they're not very scary. I had a guy come up as I was speaking one day and said, Linda, what if I'm making commitments, but I'm not being afraid? I'm not dropping into that next C, which is called courage. And I always like to say the difference between courage and fear is courage is where you wet your pants over the commitment you just told somebody you were going to do, or you decided you were going to do. And I mean, fear is that. And then courage is where you just do the thing with those wet pants on, you know?
Wow.
And we've all been in those situations, right? So he said, what's wrong if I'm not, you know, being afraid or dropping into courage? And I said, well, you're making commitments that you already know how to do. You know, you already have the credentials, which is the next C. The reason a big commitment takes courage is because you don't really know how you're going to do it. You have no idea. And then the next thing that comes when you go through that cycle is confidence. And most of us, which Dan doesn't identify the fifth C, but I believe it's there. The fifth C of this equation would be complacency.
Oh, wow.
It's real easy to move from big commitment to scary courage to getting the credentials, new credentials you need, to having confidence, to wanting to stay right in that confidence. So I think people try to wait until they're ready, or wait till someone else is ready, or till they know how to do it. And for most entrepreneurs, we get stuck in the how. And so I was never 100% sure. And I always tell my agents, when the pain of staying where you are is great enough, you'll let go. Or when you have a future that's bright enough to pull you through the being scared to let go, you will, right? It's really hard to let go of something. I had my moments where I thought, God, what was I thinking? I had a very successful real estate business. It's probably at the place where I've worked so hard to get it to, but it's almost like, okay, I got to let go now. There's not enough challenge in here. And because, you know, I feel I like that pioneering piece, that piece of where it is kind of a challenge. And most people, that's where your greatest joy is. That's where you have great memories. You have, you know, usually shared it with another human and you guys did it together. But most people, and I think more and more each day, it's just easy to sit in complacency. And so I was never 100% sure, scared to death, always never knowing that was for sure the right thing to do. But if you have the right people in your life and you truly believe it's what God's calling you to do, it's a little bit easier to let go. It's still not easy, but I think it's easier. And one of my mentors told me something one time that is one of the many things he told me that was profound, but this one was really profound for me. He said, Linda, life is about becoming. And the way you become is you get up every day and you go back out there and you see what else it is you can achieve. Sports teams don't go to the Super Bowl and win one time and go home and go, whoop, we won. They go back out on that practice field and they see who else they can become as a team. And I just, you know, and something Michael Jr. said on the Christian comedian said on the cruise that we were just on, he said, you know, I can just only imagine getting to the gates of God and him asking me, what did I do with my gifts? What did I do with my gifts? You know, and it really just makes you wonder, you know, we weren't given these gifts for nothing, right? We're given them to serve and to bring value to the world. And when you bring value to the world, the money and all those things kind of take care of themselves.
That's so good. One of the things that I know about your story is that you were, not only did you take that leap of faith, but you took it by giving away responsibility to people. And people are so messy. They're the messiest part of life and the best, you know, honestly, the best part of life. And so when you think about those partners along the way who have kind of like, you've handed off maybe an office to, or a part of your business to, and, you know, various parts of your story, you've trusted people with big things. When you're sitting across from someone, what's the number one thing that you look for in them to say, yep, I want you on my team?
Well, that's changed over the years because I made a few that didn't quite pan out. And unfortunately, I think you have to have some of those so that you recognize when you have a super talented person for a role. Everybody's talented in something. So it's not, you're not talent or you are talent. It's what are you talented for? What is something that if you got up every day, you're using your gifts, your God's gifts, most of the time in that role? That's when it's kind of like not work, you know, the productivity comes easier, all of those things. So, you know, if I there's not probably just one thing I look for. There's a few things. One, I really I've learned that if they don't have the same values, it's going to be a train wreck somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, in the past, I thought people's personal life was their personal life and how they would act in business would be different. And what I found is it's autobiographical. If they've got a screwed up life and they're, you know, cheating on their spouse, or don't think that stuff stops at the door, right? So I look for values to match. I look for someone who's learning based. The newest thing that I've added recently, honestly, is a little bit of hardship or grit or a chip on their shoulder. Because I think we've moved into a world where if it's a little bit hard, people quit. And you can't do big things by being, you know, just quitting all the time when it gets hard. Instead, it's trying to figure out, what is this trying to teach me? Why is this so hard for me? What do I need to learn? And where's my DNA in this because it's hard, you know? And so I would say probably for sure values match, learning based, because you can't grow with someone who's not growing. And the world is moving forward, whether we're moving backwards or think we're just staying still or whatever. So learning based is super important to me. And then, of course, I really would love to see some grit or hardship, because sometimes along with grit and hardships too, loyalty comes a little bit easier for people. There's a great documentary, if you haven't read it, I think it's called Giannis. He's the guy in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. And that guy had nothing but hardships. You know, you think your life's hard till you watch his documentary. But what I loved is his true loyalty to people who gave him a leg up and who believed in him. I just think that's beautiful, and I think it's rare.
I'd love to drill down on grit for just a second, but from a very selfish place, because you've got some kids, and you and Jimmy faced amazing grit and then encountered success. And my wife and I both grew up in North Dayton, kind of, and now we live in Centerville, and our life has just been very different. We've been very blessed, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, we're living a way different life than what we did growing up. And yet we acknowledge that we wouldn't be where we are today if it's not for that story. And, you know, I can only imagine in your story, you and Jimmy created this successful business, and now you've got these kids who are also in the business, and they're walking alongside of you. How do you manufacture grit when the reality is that you wouldn't have to give your kids a gritty situation if you didn't want to, right? Like, my kids live a pretty good life. How do you help them be gritty?
Well, first of all, I have to be honest, we didn't. And that's honestly, it's one of the things I look back and I would do differently. It's kind of like, once you know that, you're like, gosh, how did I not see this years ago? But because Jimmy and I both had it so tough growing up, we did not want our kids. So we made excuses of, oh, they're in basketball, or, oh, they've got gymnastics, or, oh, they got cheerleading, or, oh, they need to focus on their studies. When I think, looking back, the greater lessons would have been trying to serve other people, having people be difficult if you worked at a restaurant or something.
Yeah.
So I have to say, to be honest with you, we didn't do that very well. And here's the thing. If you don't look for ways to give them those situations to help them learn from them while they're under your roof, some will come out okay, and some it'll clip their wings a little. And so that's just being honest. And so
I
was asked,
the honesty. Yeah,
I was asked to speak into a lady's book on parenting and what advice I would give. And that was the number one advice I gave is please don't make your kids' life so easy that you cheat them of what adversity and what difficult situations can teach them that they might need later.
I'm kind of curious. You and Jimmy have interesting family histories from what I'd find in the research that I was doing in prep. And, you know, you're very close to your sister. Yep. Jimmy's had some, you guys both just had really dynamic family situations.
Yep.
How did you guys learn?
That's a nice word for it.
Thank you. I was trying to be tactful. How did you guys learn to be parents?
Yeah. I think both of us, now Jimmy had a great mother. So let me just start by saying that. And I always tell young women, if you want to know how a man's going to treat you, see how he treats his mother. Because that's his first female love, right? And so I'm very blessed that my husband taught his kids, especially our son, how to be a good son. So first I want to say that, but he didn't have that in a father. And so I think, again, God gives us everything for a reason. I don't think he picks and chooses and says, you know what, I'm giving this one a great family and this one a crappy family or whatever. I think you learn from as much sometimes from what you don't want to be. I remember very clearly those moments when I thought, gosh, my mother's missing out so much when I had kids. You know, I don't think you notice it. You're hurt as a kid yourself, but I think you feel it the most when you have your own children and you think, gosh, my mother's missed all of this for us and for now our kids. And so I think for me, I learned from, you know, my mother having regrets on her dying bed that she had to call all of her kids in and apologize for not being a good mother. And I just thought, gosh, thank you for this lesson, because I don't want that to be what I have to do on my deathbed. Sure, I'm going to have mistakes. We all do. But I don't want to have to call you all in and say, sorry about that. I botched up the one great gift God gave me by, you know, drinking it away or spending it with friends or whatever. So I think we both, if you have an adverse situation, you learn from that. And you say, I don't want that to be repeated. And then you find great mentors and people. You know, I have this formula that I teach everybody. It's called capital R plus V plus over time. And what it stands for is relationships. So who do you want to be a hero to? Who do you need to learn from, or who needs to be your mentor? It can go either way. What's your validity to get that person to pour into you? And then what's either your value gap that you need their help with, or what's their value gap if you're trying to serve them? And then how much time do I have to put into this to get the result I want? And so I think there's always people out there that would love to help you in whatever area that you feel like you need the most guidance. There's always books that you can read that of, you know, parenting tactics and things like that. I mean, wherever you need help, there's help somewhere. You just got to want it bad enough that you go search it out.
One of the things that I've learned about Keller Williams over the years is this. It's what I would call like sneaky Jesus, right? It's not overtly there. You know, it's you don't have to be a Christian to work there. I know that there are a lot of great agents who aren't. But I also know that those Christian values kind of permeate throughout the organization. It seems to, from an outsider's perspective. How do you manage the tension of your faith in a workplace that's both accepting but also raises the bar higher?
Well, I say it's kind of like recruiting. Recruiting is never about me selling somebody on my company or my faith. It's about me understanding that person, where they are, and how can I serve them, and them self-discovering that maybe I have something in my life or something that they may need in their life, or that makes me be the kind of person they want to be. I always say my greatest confirmation is when God gives me some kind of confirmation and someone comes up to me and says, I can really tell that you're a follower or that you love Jesus. And I'm like, thank you, God. I needed that confirmation, because, you know, you have so many things and we live in the gap. So whether it's our faith or our business, we're always thinking about what we're not doing compared to some other Christian. I used to really struggle with, why are people in mission fields and I'm not, am I, you know, and then I think I had our pastor, I brought it up to him once and he said, Linda, God calls people in different ways to serve. I'm like, oh, thank God he didn't call me to Africa or somewhere, you know, now that I look at it like that. But, you know, I do also know if he calls you there, he's going to equip you for it. But I think we got to stay out of comparison, and I got to be okay that some people are, you know, maybe I've been at conferences before when Mo Anderson was up on a panel and people were totally offended. And she called me crying because her goal is to never offend anybody. I said, Mo, it's okay. You can't want anything for them more than they want for themselves. And we're probably not a match right now for them. Yeah. You know, if they're that offended, we're probably not going to be a match for them right now. So, you know, I don't think it's as hard as people try to make it. I think it's how can you serve that person, and it's not about. I think it's about them and where they are and helping them, meeting them wherever they are. I feel like that's serving God every day. That you're trying to help those people wherever they are, or whatever they got going on.
I love that, because I think if we can see people, then empathy is built, right? And when there's empathy, it's hard to be offended, right?
Yeah.
When you're empathizing with people heart to heart, it's so hard to take offense to somebody who sees you in a really authentic way, which it sounds like you're describing there perfectly. One of the things I know about high achievers is that they're built on disciplines. One of the things that we say around here is that if you're not dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions.
Mm.
And so I love to talk to high achieving leaders and steal ideas. What are some of your daily disciplines, the things that are just kind of non-negotiables for you?
That's a really good question. Um, One of the things I'm truly disciplined to is health. Trying to figure out how do I be as healthy as I can be. One of the disciplines that I really work hard on and keep trying to stay focused on, because I feel the difference in my energy, is how do I stay in my gifts and my unique ability as much of the time as possible? Because when I'm there, it's that some people call it the flow. I call it, you just have an energy about you and an excitement about you that you could do this forever. You don't worry about how much money you're getting paid or how long you have to do it or any of those things. And I think that's as important as anybody's health, because we won't modify who we are for very long periods of time and be a healthy person. I also like exercise. I mean, I'm just one of those people. And I'm also smart enough to know that if I don't like it and it's super important, I have a little saying that says, if I was going to do that, I would have already.
Yeah.
And so here's a good example. At the beginning of the year, last year, my trainer was just wearing me out about stretching. And I finally looked at him one day and said, if I was going to do this, I would have already. And then my brain goes into, okay, it's super important. How do I get this done? Let me not beat myself up that I'm not going to do it, because I would have already if it was easy. So I was looking around thinking, well, how can I get this done? And I found a stretch lab. So I started going to the stretch lab. Guess what? They do the stretching for me. It's an appointment. I pay for it. I have to show up. So I think sometimes we get so stuck in beating ourselves up about the key important areas of our life. Same thing with faith, same thing with, relationships. And instead say, if this is important enough to me, how do I get it done? It doesn't have to be just one way that works for somebody else. Now, cardio I can do, no problem. I don't need somebody to get me up. I don't need somebody to make me do it. But for lifting weights, if I don't write somebody a big fat check and have an appointment, it doesn't happen. Same with stretching. So I think one of the best disciplines I have is just learning to say, okay, these are really important areas. I have to figure out a way to do it, but the way I'm trying to do it isn't working. So what would work? So I think that's probably, one of the best disciplines you have is to figure out what's keeping you from doing the key things that you really need to do. And there's always a way. Sometimes it's accountability to another person.
Sure.
Sometimes it's, something else, but just not being unwilling to just say, well, that's just not me. I won't do that.
Yeah, that's really well stated. I was curious. I wrote a note a while ago about when you said you had that pioneering spirit, and a lot of my podcast family has that pioneering spirit. A lot of entrepreneurs and executives, guys like Trent, and here's what I know about the pioneering spirit is that sometimes we can pioneer our way right to self-destruction, because we're pioneering in areas where maybe we're not ready yet, or we're getting ahead of God's grace, or maybe we haven't sat there long enough and kind of like been in the moment. What safeguards do you put in place so that you don't pioneer your way to a place that you don't want to be?
And by that, do you mean like I'm doing too many paths, or
yeah,
I'm doing
too many paths, or like for me, for example, I have a tendency to want to explore things. And I overcommit too quickly before I fully explored them. And I was like, I should not the other day I was doing some coaching for a client, and I sent an email that I should have not sent, right? Like I should have just waited a little bit longer, talked to a little bit more people. And I was so excited because I could see the end, right? I could see the next thing that it cost me a little bit of relational equity on the front side.
Mm.
And I would imagine, you've got multiple platforms running at the same time. You've got a team of people, and yet you're probably similar to me thinking about the next 5 things down the road, not just the
Mm-hmm.
thing you're doing now. How do you protect yourself and your team from that mindset?
Well, I think I hear 2 things. One, you're probably a quick start. So if it goes through your brain, it comes out quickly.
Amen.
So, well, first of all, know that about yourself and know where that's caused you issues. Being willing to ask for forgiveness. I'm honestly, it's so funny because my husband he gets our whole marriage. He's gotten all the sweet notes from, my daughter saying how wonderful he is and all those things. And I get the hard note that says, thanks for working so hard, and so it's hard. And her and I struggle a little bit. And my husband said to me several times, Linda, it's not, because I'll say, you're saying the same thing I'm saying. And he said, but it's how you're saying it. So knowing enough about yourself that, again, that it's okay. It's up to me to figure out how to do this differently, because that's too important to me to not do it differently. All right. So that would be one thing I would say. In those situations, you're going to screw up, and you got to have enough capital with people that there's grace. And I think when you're willing as the leader to say, I'm so sorry, I screwed up. It's the way I said that, and I shouldn't have said it that way. Here's what I really meant. Then I think, as long as it doesn't happen all the time and you don't seem to be not working on it or doing it. And then the other thing I heard in this question was, how do you stay on track with the things? Because as entrepreneurs, ideas are our thing. And it's not a lack of them. We have millions of them. But after a while, you realize you can't chase all of those ideas. So one of the best things that happened to me is probably about 12 years ago. I went to a small event. I had donated some money to a cause for building some schools over in Africa. And for the top people, got a kind of a semi-private thing with Michael Hyatt. Well, I love Michael Hyatt. I love all of his books. I love him as a human. And so I took my daughter, and her and I went to it. And there they put you on a hot seat, and you got to talk about what is it you do. And I think a lot of people, because don't have clarity about kind of what their purpose is, everything looks good, right? And so in that moment, one of the things that Michael Hyatt's daughter actually helped me come up with is, my purpose is, I truly love, and this is what my unique ability is I help successful but overworked entrepreneurs understand the power of leverage and passive income so that they can get freedom and margin for what matters most to them.
Wow.
So if you have some kind of filter and you get a bright, shiny idea, which we all do, it helps you decide, do I take action on this or do I not take action on this? And that's hard because I like new things. I don't like it when it gets easy. I believe you're either an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, and they're both entrepreneurs. But an entrepreneur really gets their fulfillment when things are hard or don't really have the clear path of how to do it. And they don't feel as content when you're now just managing the thing. And I've learned that about myself, that I'm not the person to manage it. I'm the multiplier of it. I'm the beginning started or whatever. And I'm a multiplier. I can see multiplying ideas, but I need that other great person that is more of an entrepreneur, that they would rather have it and make it all better. So I think, you got to kind of really pay attention to yourself and to what gets you in trouble and what gives you great results and those kind of things. And again, not beating yourself up over that, but finding a solution to it.
Yeah, that's really well stated. I'm curious, what are some of your dreams for the next 5 years? Like where's Linda and Jimmy going? Like what's next? how can we come alongside you and pray with you for what God is doing in and through your life?
Well, I would say first and foremost, clarity that I hear God, that I'm very clear about that I'm on the path that I'm supposed to be on. And to be honest with you, I love what I do. And I'm a believer in that as you can tell from the 10X is easier and 2X book, I let go of the things that no longer give me energy. And the more I practice that and the better I get at it, the more content I am in my life. So I love one of my favorite things to do, and I've been doing this since 2000, coming up to Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. And I see an agent that is a very talented person where they are, but the person that's leading them doesn't see it. And so to be able to go and get in relationship with them and bring them into an opportunity that they get to flourish. And then I get to go back months later and see this very same amazing person flourish because they're in an environment that's about productivity and about opportunity if they want it. That's exciting to me. Wow. I could do that all day long for the next 25 years. Matter of fact, I get unhappiest when I'm not doing enough of that. So here's a really good example. And I've learned if I'm not doing that, it's my fault. I don't have a system or something in front of me. So not too long ago, we do this thing called Leadership Academy, and we run so many of our leaders through, and it's been fabulous. I wish I'd have thought of it 20 years ago, but I get to know our agents that I wouldn't normally get to know, and we love doing it. Well, the problem is right after Leadership Academy, that's it. We don't really, maybe we see them at a training event or whatever. So I said to my assistant one day, I said, look, I want to go back and have phone calls with everybody who's gone through Leadership Academy. I want to check in on them, see if I can help them in any way, whatever. And so first week comes along and my computer says task overdue next week, and next week more task overdue. And I'm like, this doesn't feel very good. So I called my assistant back in and said, okay, the idea is good, but something's not working. Here's what we're going to change. You make the call, you set up the appointment, and then when it's on my calendar, you have them call me. And it's worked like a charm. And I probably spend no more than 30 minutes on the phone with any of them, but I've gotten such joy from it. And a few of them I've actually been able to help through some things. And I mean, it's been amazing. So I think just, more of that. Because I did strategic coach yesterday, and he drew this graph of striving and there. When you're there, you're no longer striving, you're just expanding. So my future is about expanding. I love finding talented people that I can now help them go be the leaders. So it's really all about the who now, and us finding the who's and then figuring out how we can help them get in the spot that they will flourish.
Amen. I love that. Okay, I have one more question for you, but before I ask it, I know that my podcast family is going to want to connect with you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things Linda? I know you've got a podcast, you've got books, where's all the things?
Oh gosh. And everybody asks me that question. I don't know hardly any of it. I don't know my Instagram handle. So here's the best thing. LindaMcKissack.com I know has a bunch of stuff on it.
That's actually, it's a really great website. You and your team have done a great job, and all your social media links are at the bottom of that.
Oh, good. Well, thank you, because it's all about the team. And honestly, collaboration with other gifts and talents is probably the most rewarding thing anybody can do. And when you feel it, it's like a gel that just gets you giddy and exciting. And honestly, that's a little bit hard for solopreneurs to kind of get to that place. But just trust me, if you can get to that place, so much more rewarding than, and I've got a big ego. I had to do sales the way I did, but I've loved moving into that place where it's so much joy, just as much joy to bring talented people around you and collaborate with them, and everybody putting their magic in the pot,
So good. Okay, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes too, if people want to hit your website up and pick up a copy of the book or any of the work that you've done to help so many entrepreneurs. Last question I love to ask people. It's an advice question. I'm going to ask you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice. And I want to take you back to your very first day at Keller Williams years ago. If you could sit down with that younger version of yourself, that young lady who's wide-eyed about what's in front of her, you just gave up all of those potential listings from your old company to make the jump. If
Mm-hmm.
you could sit knee to knee with that younger version of you, look her in the eyes, and give her one piece of advice
I
about
would
what she's going
say,
to go through, what would you say?
well, I would say success is going to come with you working through people, not around them,
Hmm.
taking people with you when you go in this success. And the faster you learn to master people, the happier you're going to be, the more fulfilled you're going to be, and the more success you're going to have.
Amen.
Because I think most realtors only think about their capacity. I know I was that way. And they just don't believe that the joy and the results that they can get if they learn to. And it does take mastering. People are hard. You can't just dabble in it. You have to be committed to it. And people, there's a great saying somewhere, I got to find it because I keep always quoting it, but people will disappoint you, love them anyway.
Hmm.
And there's all these other things that are on there. And it's so true. And I think people give up before they truly master people. And it's an ongoing thing. I don't think we'll ever be there, but we can certainly make progress.
That's amazing. That's so good. Linda, I deeply appreciate the generosity of time today and your willingness to hop on this call with me, and for all that you do for Southwest Ohio, and just thank you. And I'd love to stay connected as
Absolutely.
we continue to grow.
Well, my pleasure. And I'm up in Dayton a lot, so maybe we can have a coffee.
I would be my honor.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day.